Primary Producers Topic 2, Phytoplankton. So in the ocean, we distinguish between nekton and plankton. And we're going to be talking about nekton in another chapter. Plankton, they drift or swim weakly. They're going where the ocean currents go. They are unable to move consistently against waves and currents, and plankton is Greek for wandering. And we can divide plankton into phytoplankton, which are our primary producers, and zooplankton is a heterotrophic, and together they're probably the most important of all marine communities, which we are discussing in a later chapter. Primary producers synthesize organic material. So here in this case, you can see that the diatom, which is it's a phytoplankton, and it converts or photosynthesizes carbon dioxide with the help of sunlight into a glucose or a starch. So carbon dioxide and sunlight and water are inorganic. So by photosynthesizing carbon dioxide and water, the diatom takes two inorganic substances and turns it into an organic molecule. So glucose or simple carbohydrates are the end product. And then all heterotrophs have to feed off glucose or other for their energy. And here I want to show you the importance of marine communities in the role of net primary productivity. So in the ocean communities, coral reefs are the most productive ecosystem, followed by kelp bed. You can see the plankton over continental shelf is much less. Open ocean is very little because most of the nutrients are closer to the shore. And then from land communities, rainforest and temperate forests, freshwater swamps and cropland also have a high net primary productivity, but coral reefs are the most productive. So the ocean has a net primary productivity of about 100 and all land 150. So overall, according to the study, land is more productive than the ocean, but the coral reefs are being the most productive environment. And the phytoplankton productivity varies with conditions, with local conditions. So the most productive in areas are the areas with high level of nutrients. They're highest near the continents, where nutrients are upwelling or nutrients come into the ocean from runoff. Tropical waters are so very clear and blue because they have very few phytoplankton. They are an oceanic desert. Phytoplankton, they produce about 90 to 96% of the ocean's carbohydrates. We talk about primary productivity, and what that means is grams per carbon per square meter per year. CO2 is the carbon source, and glucose or carbohydrates is the product. Here in these satellite images from NASA, you can see these phytoplankton blooms from the air. So all these greenish colors or the turbulent or more opaque colors are areas with high productivity. Not all primary producers are phytoplankton, even though the rest of this topic is concentrated on primary producers. Some are seaweeds, seagrasses, and mangroves. They are not phytoplankton. And then we also have discovered in the 1970s that there are chemosynthetic microbes that live near hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor or even in seabed sediments and even in solid rock. The outside or covering of a diatom is called a frustule, and it's a rigid wall, cell wall made out of silica. Marine diatoms, they come in many different shapes and sizes. And the largest of these is about the size of a period at the end of a sentence. There's also freshwater lake diatoms. So some of the diatoms float, others lie on shallow bottoms. They store energy at fatty acid or oils, and the oils helps them to sink and float to keep the balance. And they are found in many petroleum source rocks. Diatoms have small perforation that gives them their names. Dia means through and tomos to cut. The first diatoms on record are from the Cretaceous period. So here's a diatom which plumes, and they can create harmful algae plumes that are causing crabs to be toxic, and marine mammals, they die off as they are eating on this toxic food. And these plumes seem to be becoming more common as the ocean warms. So this one is from November of 2015. This diatom produces a neurotoxin, a domonic acid, and that can lead to damage to the neurons, which can lead to the permanent loss of neurological functions. And that can lead to amnesic shellfish poisoning. So usually when you eat shellfish that has been affected and poisoned, you usually get sick within about 24 hours of consumption of contaminated shellfish. The symptoms include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal cramps. In more severe cases, neurological symptoms occur, which can include headaches, hallucination, confusion, short-term memory loss, respiratory difficulties, seizures, coma, and in extreme cases, death. And so this image, you can see the darkest green areas have the highest surface chlorophyll concentration, and therefore the largest amounts of phytoplankton, including both toxic and harmless species. And here's a picture of the US West Coast cleaning up after a harmful algae plume. So over the past few months after this outbreak, which stretched from central California to the Alaska Peninsula, has resulted in significant impacts to coastal resources and marine life. NOAA has been working closely with federal, state, tribal, and academic and other partners to respond to this unprecedented harmful algae plume, and that was in 2011. So Anthony Odell, he's a scientist at UW, he describes it as the toxic plankton soup. Everything in the ocean eats phytoplankton or eats something that eats phytoplankton. So when you have one of these species that start producing toxin, it works its way up through the food chain really fast. The toxin gets into shellfish, it gets into crabs, it gets into small fin fish like sardines and anchovies, which are then fed on by salmon, pelicans, and seals and sea lions. The next group of phytoplankton I want to introduce you to are dinoflagellates. They are single-cell autotrophs. A few species live within the tissue of other organisms. For example, the zooxanthella lives in the tissue of coral polyps. And we're going to be talking about polyps and corals later. The protective outer cell wall of dinoflagellates is made out of cellulose. Dinoflagellates have two whip-like flagellas. One is for forward movement and the other for rotation. And they can adjust their orientation to get the maximum light for photosynthesis. Dino is Greek for whirling and flagellum, whip. Dinoflagellates are responsible for causing red tides, which is another form of harmful algae plumes or HAPs. And these can happen because of excessive nutrients that are reaching the ocean. And when the ocean has too many nutrients, we call that eutrophication. So it happens because we are fertilizing our land, and a lot of this fertilizer or sewage and so on is reaching the ocean, and it's delivering like phosphates and other limiting factors or nutrients in the ocean. And then with the excess nutrients, you get these big algae plumes. Most of them are also bioluminescent. That means they are producing their own lights. And it's not that all dinoflagellates are causing red tides. There's also many that are harmless. The last phytoplankton I want to introduce you to in this topic are coccolithophores. They are also small single-celled autotrophs, so they photosynthesize. Their discs that you see in the lower left image is made out of calcium carbonate. And these are microscopic organisms. On the upper right side, you see a satellite image of Ireland. And to the southwest of Ireland, you can see this greenish cloud in the ocean water. That greenish turquoise color shows a coccolithophore plume. When these coccolithophores, when they die and the organic matter decays, these discs that you can see in the coccolithophore on the left side are going to fall on the ocean floor. And over millions of years, they pile up and they can get lithified, turning into rock. So on the lower right, I have an image of the chalk cliffs or the white cliffs of Dover. These cliffs are made mostly out of these microscopic little plates of coccolithophores. So what these guys don't have in size, they make up by quantity. So before we finish this topic, I have two quick concept check questions coming up. So the first one is, what is a first rule? The correct answer is B, the rigid cell wall of a diatom. Diatoms have a rigid cell wall of frustule composed of patterns of perforation. As much as 95% of the mass of the frustule consists of silica. Here's the next question. What characteristics distinguishes most dinoflagellates from diatoms and coccolithophores? The answer is C, flagella. Most dinoflagellates have two whip-like projections called flagella, in channels grooved in their protective outer cell wall of cellulose. One flagellum drives the organism forward, while the other causes it to rotate in the water.